Also, just because it's so overcrowded, you don't want them to swarm.
When you do pull the queen out, is there a tendency then for the bees to cripple themselves?
There's no room. And, well, yes, sort of. But that usually that box that we're taking off has most of your eggs in it because she's been working up there. And so you just yank those and send them with her.
So the queen is next door.
No. There's so many bees in there, they don't know what to do. It's very confusing for them. And you only have like a week or two, and then by the time they go, oh, we're going to try and raise a queen, well, then it's too late because now you're combining her back in.
Or do you have to keep her in a little box to introduce her back in that hive?
I put a single piece of newspaper, and I make 3 slits, spritz it with sugar water, put her box back on top, and you'll, within 2-3 days, all those shredding things are coming out. You want to make sure you don't have any queen cells going on in there.
You say you check the queen cell?
I do. Yeah. But usually it's so packed with nectar and pollen, there's not enough eggs. And it's an opportunity. There we go. Okay, so this is kind of what it looks like when you start knocking stuff down. So this was a 2. I knocked it down into 1, put the inner cover back on, and then I put an empty box there, mostly for heat to dissipate through, because most of my lids are dark black, flat black lids, and that's a lot of heat, but it dehydrates the nectar faster. But that's what you want it to look like. The first day, they're probably 1 inch to 2 thick on the front, so don't freak out. It's okay, because there's no queen there. She can't go anywhere. You already moved her. So here's your medium box that's been dumped in. And it's got a little spacer again to let heat get out. But you want to dump them as much as possible. This one didn't get dumped, and a little bit of them kind of scooched over. But the next day I went out and I dumped that one too, so everybody was unhappy. That's the picture, the one we were just looking at. Again, then there's that empty box on top, and you're banging them down, and the beacons go on. I also number mine so that I know who's the best performer. Because you can also do those little, they make some little tiny little boxes you can put in a frame, and they'll lay the comb, they'll build the comb right in that. And then you give a little plastic spoon and you label it healthy snack, and you get like $5 for that, which is crazy. And if you do that at the fair, it's amazing. Okay. You can also do the comb in the jars, which I think is like, it's kind of like cut comb, but not really. It's more of a conversation piece. You can start these with, just take a regular jar, drill holes in either inner cover or just regular plywood. I put a few drips of wax in it and then quickly turn it upside down so it drips down a little bit. You can put a piece of, you can cut little strips of this, drip in some wax, hold the strip in with like a little pair of hemostats or something. You want to make sure though that it's what? Straight. Because otherwise you get the wonky, crazy combs. You can see where the strip was facing this way, because here's your side rib. You don't want to put your rib here. You want the ribs on the side of the jar. These are really nice. So you're going to put an empty box around the top of these, because of course the people want it dark. This was just for photography. Make it look nice. And when you go to harvest it, once this is filled and capped, you just take it off, and I just bring it up by the garage, maybe 40 feet away from the hives, face it so the jar is facing up, and all the bees go back to the hive because it's getting dark, it's cooler, and they want to go back home, and that's an easy way to get rid of the bees out of it. Oops, go back. For this one, on a cone jar like that, that's a quart. We get $45 for that. And fill it with honey that you have to heat so that it won't crystalline. But at the fair, we bring like a dozen of them and it's on the first day. Again, it's amazing. These little ones, a lot of times we'll do those for like, we'll do them now, but we do them for the holiday. This holiday craft fair. Okay, so here's what you gotta get. You need your wax cappings from last time. That was just you need wax cappings from last time. And what I do is we have a solar melt, we have a couple solar melters. I just go out and I crack off some. Or if you know someone in the club, like you can buy cleaner wax. I have an old glass Pyrex cup, measuring cup, and that way you can run it through the microwave. Don't overheat it, but enough to make it kind of run it. And then I put it in a pan of hot water. We have an Instant Pot. You just fill it up there. Put it on a hot pad though, because again, the family comes in, they're going to yell at you. I keep a shish kebab stirrer so I can keep it stirred up. You want it to start tracing along the edge. That is cool enough so that you don't melt the wax foundation. That makes sense. Take it from me that if it's not starting to trace, if it's that hot, it will melt that. And that's what happens to this one. Then that one. I brought a lot of good examples of what not to do. Again, I went to Goodwill, a big shopper at Goodwill, to find a lot of my stuff. And you can get a pizza cutter for like $1 sometimes. The reason you want to go to Goodwill and get one is because after you get done cutting it all, there's wax on it, and if you run it through the dishwasher, that's a problem. You know that. Or if you clean it off and put it back in the drawer, and so, is that wax? No. And I always say no. Why would there be wax on it?
Where would that come?
Where would it come? Bees don't eat wax. Or eat. So anyway, so you want to have cappings to melt. And again, you can see where this melted and I call it sludge of and this is the thin set. So again, you could use a whole sheet, but a sheet of thin set's like 95 cents. And if you, I usually leave, it comes with paper in between it, and I just cut it with a little piece of butter to like, maybe about an inch strip. So you've seen enough. I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot. You just want to give them an idea of what you want them to do. What they do is do. And again, you can make them bigger, but I mean, shallow frames. The big thing is that when you put them together, make sure that they are straight. They can't be kind of twisty or anything like that. And then, when you glue in or wax in the little strips, make sure that they're straight. And make sure that you put them somewhere. You can't lay that frame then on its side because until it hardens really good, and that's going to make the girls pull it sideways, even though they know that. Okay, so you can use just a split top one, or you can do the one where you have to rip off that little. But I just buy you can see, nothing fancy, just the plain ones. You fit it in there, you pour your little bit of wax along, and you're done. I mean, why waste the time pushing it in there, nailing it back down? You know, to me, it just does. Again, I already talked about this. You can do, in the beginning, I would say use make a bigger strip, maybe like 2-3 inches, just so you get more confident of how low you can go. It's easier or harder to keep it from getting wavy. The longer it is, the easier it is for it to wave because heat is going to affect it a lot. I try to do this like in January. We heat with wood, so sometimes that Chuck's got the house at like 75, 80. So that might not be the best time to do it. If it's a little bit cooler, it's easier for it not to get soft. If you do it like now, or like what Thursday, it's gonna be fine. Not a good time. Because it's gonna be too soft. And we already talked, so measure it. Do your slicing, and then you're gonna use the hot wax to secure it in its place. And I pass that around so you can see what it looks like. It doesn't take a whole lot. You'll see on those frames coming around. You just need a thin bead.
And as a footnote, I mean, you can buy it, or not to step on you, but I've taken a piece of copper tubing and cut a 40, I'll call it a 45 on the bottom of it, smash it down so there's still enough room that wax can come out, and lowly, and put some tape or whatnot to insulate your hand. And I have done a pot of wax per se, put my thumb over the end cap of it to seal it off, and then drawn my line that way.
Not that clever. I would forget to
Put your thumb on it.
or that it would be too hot and be like, ow.
It's not bad.
Yeah, it's,
I'm just saying that,
Yeah. There's a lot of options.
right, I was pointing out another options on it.
Depending on how many you want to do. You know, there's, I might have a picture, we all know Mike Palmer. Mike Palmer has got quite a setup. He's got an actual, almost like a little copper pot thing that he made. So, I mean, there's a lot that you can do.
What do you do?
I just pour it with a little measuring cup. It's a 1 cup measure. And you just pour it in there, and then when you've got your little line, and then you make sure that that strip is nice and straight. And then I usually just set it on the kitchen table until it's dry, and then I hang it in the boxes so that it can't move anymore. I did used to use that skewer, like for shish kebabs, but that took too long. And again, then the big thing is you want to make sure that they hang in so that they hang straight, and it needs to be not real warm so that there isn't any movement. So once you put that box on the hives, couple things. One, make sure the hive is level. Okay. The other thing too is, for me, I find that if the frames run north and south, I get straighter comb. I don't know why. It's weird. If I have them going east and west, then sometimes I get wonky stuff, because if you look at that, there was no straight starter strip in that. Again, have it level.
North, south,
For the frames. So the hive will be facing east, and your frames are running this. I had the same problem with pop bars when you guys were out at the house. I showed you guys. It's, how do they know? Is there, I don't know. Okay. So again, you want to make sure that they're drawing it out evenly, hopefully. I keep going in and manipulating the frames. You know how you do as a beginner person? The outside ones, you keep turning them so that they keep pulling it out. For when you're doing cut comb, they're going to pull the center ones out first. So as soon as they're getting down there pretty good, maybe halfway, I move it over and put an empty one in the middle. And see what happens is, if they've already got that template started where it's nice and straight, like 3 inches down, you put an empty one in there from the outside of the box, then they're going to follow that template, pull it straight. You have a question?
I know you're talking about the cut comb, but in general, if you're just trying to, I'm brand new, I don't know. If you're just trying to get things to live, does it matter if they're east, west, or south, north?
No, if you use plastic foundation, they already have the template.
Okay.
There is no guessing. They already know I have to do it this way. If you are going to do natural comb, then that's a whole different thing, where you like a starter strip, like a popsicle stick or something like that. Definitely start with like some type of foundation that already has a stamped template on it if you're a new person. For your regular hive.
And it can face any direction.
Anyway, okay, yeah, they're all over. The bees don't care. They don't read that book. The big thing too that we have to remember, you took the queen out. They got nothing to do. There's no young to feed. So they are gonna build combs, store things a lot. So they can, like I said earlier, they can fill a whole 10-frame box and cap it in a week. If it's warm enough and that you've got a strong enough nectar flow. So again, you don't want to not give them enough room because they'll abscond for heat. All right, they're not going to swarm because they have no queen, but they will leave because it's too hot and it's too crowded. All right, so you want to make sure that keep that in another box. I've gone up to 3 to 4 cut comb boxes on one hive, and they do fine. Always put the empty box in between. So you have your deep, and you're going to get and add another box. You're going to take off the cut comb box, put the empty cut comb box with one frame in that it started, put the one that they already worked on so that they tunnel up. That makes sense? Because these really like that part. Okay, as soon as it is capped, you can get it out of there. Because if you don't, they walk on it, and we all know that nobody in the hive wipes their feet, and that propolis will get on everything, including the cappings on your cut comb. So as soon as it is capped off, pull it. All right? I take it out one frame at a time. I have kind of like a Tupperware tote, and I pull it out, and I brush the bees off right in front of the hive so they all have to march back in there. And then that way, you just take this back up to the house, just the frame. I would take a container that is bee-proof so they don't try and get back on it, and I put it in the wheelbarrow or some way to pull it, because again, this is a lot of weight and you don't want it banging around and damage the caps. So anyway, so once you get it in the house, you have a couple options. Now, we all know we have small hive beetle, right? We all know we have wax moth, and we know that the larva from those is really disgusting. So a couple things you want to do is you want to freeze it somewhere in time. Okay, sometimes when the frames come in, the whole box goes to the freezer because of what time of the year. If people are hunting in the house or not. So these were ones that had been frozen. They were cut loose, laid in the tote, wax paper, next row. So we got like 4 rows of cut comb in, wet in the freezer. You need to freeze it for anywhere from at least 3 days. When I started doing this, they said 24 hours. If you've got it layered or there's a lot in there, that's not long enough, and it doesn't damage it. If it's capped, we know, honey, once it's capped, you're good. It can freeze. It doesn't change anything. So again, we talked about sorting the supers. A lot of times when I pull boxes to come in, most of them from all my yards are dark brown. This was from church. But I put all the deeps in one area, and yeah, I had deep honey super because I run out of honey supers. And
Silly woman.
I know. Well, a lot of this too was back when my son lived there.
Young
guy.
boy.
He moved an hour away, and I think that was on purpose. Just too far to come home and help mom. And then all the cut comb boxes go over here. So this way, when extracting is going on and you have people who want to help, if the boxes are colored, you can say, don't touch those yellow boxes, or now it's the box with the sticker on it. Don't touch those. Yeah, that's very crazy. But sort of, so that you know what's where, and helpers will know better. On these, you can see that a lot of light colored white wax. Again, that's what you're looking for. The longer it stays on the hive, the more they walk on it and get a little bit yellow then, but you want the white wax ones. And you want what I call fat frames. I think you had asked about how close do you start? You start close because look how nice and even those are pulled out. As they get where they haven't started capping yet, but they're still building, I pull one. If you count those, there's none, right? I think there's none. But anyway, because I like fat frames, one, because they're easier to cut off, and two, that they fill the box, I mean, from top to bottom. If you're going to do competition, don't go by me because you won't have a chance. Mine come out like, Can we say about that too? If you are going to do competition, make sure that when you're doing your 3 cuts and you put them in the boxes, you put them in the right orientation. The judge is going to look which way that rib and they're facing. And you're going to cut it with a real hot knife so that you don't damage the edges of your comb. And then you're going to let it drain on your cookie rack on top of a cookie sheet for probably at least 24 hours. And cover it with like wax paper so you don't get anything on it. But it'll come out. But anyway, back to the fat frames. Again, you'll see all this real white wax. Don't scrape off the tops at all. Just wait until you're going to cut it loose from the frame. Because sometimes when you're taking your hive tool across the top, you may damage this part of it, which may be far enough down to make a difference on your cut. Again, we're doing this to sell to the public. So I know sometimes it sounds like that's what you're really being picky. But again, the more picky you are, the better your product looks, the more money you get. And the stuff that you mess up in the
No, you cut it into 1-inch squares and put it in a little honey jar and sell it for $5 a pop.
yes, we'll get to that part too. I got that one coming up.
Yeah, because I took past that piece of info to you a few years ago.
Chunk comb. But again, with the chunk comb part, we'll talk about that too. The honey that you backfill that with has to be heated to at least 110, maybe 120. You don't want any crystals at all in it because if that ever crystallizes in the jar, it's a mess.
No, I don't have any problems getting crystals.
I didn't have one with that. It didn't go well. It was a mess. Now it's not that. So anyway, so back to the fat frames. You can see here's the wood. Look how much you have on each side. This one is a little bit lumpy. What happens here, they started to build and then there was probably a change in nectar flow and that's where it was off a little bit. So again, the more that you can get cooled at the same time, get those boxes on early. But fat frames are very important. So what you're going to do again, Goodwill, because if you take something out of the kitchen, it never comes back the same. So you can get a nice little knife for like 50 cents at Goodwill. What I do is I will take my little knife and I have a hot jar of water from the Instant Pot, and I have it sitting in there so that it's real hot. I always cut across the top first, and then I cut the 2 sides, and then I cut the bottom. Don't cut the top and the bottom and then the sides, because what happens, as soon as you loosen the top and the bottom, they've got it pretty well attached. You'll see on this one that it'll crack in the center from the weight, because remember we're doing fat frames. So make sure that you do the top, then the sides, then the bottom. And you're going to cut it. You'll see it's on a cooling rack. Again, it's amazing how much wax doesn't come off these things when it's done. You can get, I pick them up for like $1, these cooling racks, so that they're not. And then I also get those giant cookie sheets. They don't have to be very deep, maybe like 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, just real thin, because you're going to have all these pieces sitting cut, draining for 24 hours. You can get a Kelly cutter. Some people use that, but how do you heat that? A friend of mine uses a hot plate and he just lets it sit there and he's got a hot pan.
No, I do, I keep I got one of the Presco, oil fryers for like French fries. I put a little bit of water in it and I take some I keep some paper towels with me. It sits in there because I'm not cutting through with it. All I'm doing is using it for is marking.
Ah, okay.
All I use it for is so I have some idea where I'm going. So I'll stamp it maybe 2, 3. I might do the whole frame. It goes back into the Presto, the hot water bath. The other thing I do is I run a couple of filleting knives in an old Corning coffee pot, the ceramic one.
Yeah.
And that I'll keep hot.
Mhm.
And because I'll do maybe one cut and I'll swap it to the next knife.
Right.
And I'll work 2 or 3 knives. That and the other thing I like, I've gone to the commercial cookie sheet.
Yeah.
No, the commercial.
Yeah.
And got the commercial size one. They'll fit the commercial, and I can do, I think four frames on it. And usually all I do at the time is 4 frames anyways. So it works out good. And then I run it because everything I do honey wise, not to step on Peggy, is in the shop except for cut comb. And that I'll either do out on the back picnic table after dark or I'll do in the house.
Because again, it's very aroma. I mean, it's real strong and you'll have every day in the neighborhood. Don't do it during the day unless you're indoors. With this little Kelly cutter, this is how people do it. And they heat it up and then would just push right through it. So it was like, so I did buy one. There's a lot of money in beekeeping. It's stars. They'll send out the equipment part more. But again, it's got to be pretty hot to cut through the wax. So you don't disturb, tear up the edges too much. What I do is I just take my little box and on the frame, you won't lay that out again, but on the frame you can see I just hold the box there and I mark. And I make little knife marks all the way down. So that then I take a hot knife and just cut straight through it. And again, this one was over frozen. Yeah.
How do you flip it from frame?
Oh, the Kelly cutter?
No, from the-
Cookie sheet.
Cooling rack.
It's on the cooling rack. Your home honey's on the cooling rack.
That's coming up.
Yeah. Oh,
It's coming up.
sorry, I gotta speak.
That's okay. See the cooling rack in the back there? So here, these had already been frozen. So they've been cut, and then I will carefully pick them up and lay them on top of the cooling rack. And it has a cookie sheet under it, and then let them drain 24 hours. And so it looks like that. How's that? Again, normally I do, like you do, there's 4 cuts, and I can do 4 frames at a time. You want to have them, you don't have to space them out this much, but make sure that when they're draining, there's something under it to catch it. You will be surprised how much drains off. And again, we do this out in the sunroom. That's the top of the hot tub, so it's got a nice, dry, clean area. And if anything does get sticky where it's not supposed to be, the chunk comb, when we go to cut this one, there's going to be about an inch and a half left over that's too big if you frames. If it's shallow, it's a perfect 4x4 cut. Depends how many boxes, where they're at, and if I've run out of time. So sometimes it's just on me. But what do you do with all the extra stuff then? You get yourself this is a pint jar, and we fill up both sides of it. Again, if you're going to do competition, make sure that the rib is straight and that the cells are facing up. Okay? And one year I got, see what I'm talking
Yeah,
about?
well, see, you didn't, when you was talking about in the boxes, you wasn't clarified on what you was talking about there, and I think that's.
Okay, so, because we know like when they build comb, all the cells are at 17 degrees facing up so nobody falls out. So when you are doing whether competition or for your regular stuff, just make sure that all the ribs are lined up nicely and the cells are all facing up. Okay? Again, heat the honey up and then cool it back to room temperature. Room temperature should be somewhere around 80 degrees or less. If it's real less, then it's really going to be hard to pour it in there. But I just usually, put some in the bottling tank, pull it up to like 110 and set the thermometer on that. And when it cools back down to 80, then I fill it. When you go to fill it, you're going to fill it from the side. And that's one of the reasons too that then if the cells are facing up, you won't get air bubbles. If they're facing down, it traps, sometimes the honey will get trapped in your comb cuts and then it doesn't look nice.
How do you keep your comb from floating up in jars for competition?
Okay. Make sure there's nobody in here. Don't say anything. I put a little bit of, I warm it just a little bit so that when I put it in the bottom, it stays there. That was a disclaimer. No, it wasn't. Okay. Can you
That was
get
what
that
other
out?
people do.
Yeah, that's, yeah, for
You've
a
heard of
friend.
people doing that.
Yeah, I heard that is done.
Yeah.
The other thing too is I cut it so that it's really close to the top of that. I try to get it as close as I can.
It still floats up.
Very little.
Mine float up and then level drops. So then the levels,
Yeah, try,
because it floats up again.
and you don't need much. You could melt and put 2 drops and put it in there. That'll help. That's
See, I gotta edit that out so my judges.
yeah.
They aren't here tonight. You know them.
Yeah, I know that. And then when I judge, I look for that too.
Oh,
Because I know.
Do as I say.
Because I know that's, but if you put 2 drops.
You're not allowed back home.
I know. But if you put the 2 drops and you put the rib on it, it won't show. But you didn't hear that.
Yeah, that's
I
what
heard
I'm-
that from a friend. Yeah. Okay, moving on. Who's on the other call? Who's on the call? Anybody I know? No? Okay, all right. And again, like I said, make sure you have your lines facing up, line them up as best as you can, and then fill from the side so that you don't have any air bubbles. Because I heard they take off air bubbles. Again, notice how it won't come up then. 2 drops, but use the lightest wax that you have.
Yeah, I know, because I
And you're
don't, because see, I don't
put it in a
usually
white jar.
No,
worry about it.
this is what we sell at the fair. A pint jar with 2 pieces of chunk goes for 20. So, again, this is what I'm saying, and we bring like a dozen at a time, and I can't even get from the parking lot to the ag building, and they're gone. And it's like, so I'm like, so I don't know if we're allowed to do, and this should not be. I don't even know if we're allowed to be doing that, but anyway, it never makes it to the building. And again, they do have to be labeled correct.
The weight issue's been the biggest challenge for me.
Mentally, or?
Yeah,
Oh.
as far as coming up with,
Watch it. Just go ahead.
no, as far as, okay, I got a piece of chunk comb that a lot of times it's, when I do chunk comb, it's because I only do maybe a case or 2, and it's usually, I'm going to call it my miscuts, for lack of a better word. That or, it's occasionally you have frames that don't fill out right,
Yeah.
but they fill out, they're fat, really fat frames where, sorry, they don't fit in that box without crushing it.
Yeah.
That they go chunk comb.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, what's my weight there before I start adding because every one of them is going to be a little bit individually
Very
different. And so it becomes a real juggling.
So what he's talking about is that in the state of Ohio, we have to follow the weights and measures for the ODA stuff. What I do is I put in the chunk comb, then I backfill it and I will weigh it and mark that down. Then I put an empty jar on there and figure out what the difference is. So then that way, my scale turns off too fast. I used to put an empty jar on it, get that amount,
Do a
and then tear it out, and then put the other one, put the foam in it, then fill it, and my scale doesn't want to cooperate. But anyway, so that's what it looks like when it's done. It's very attractive. And it's a pint jar. Where are you gonna get $20? This was probably maybe 5 years ago. That frame, that big. I should date them.
I've got a question about the weight.
Yeah.
Are you marking the weight of the foam?
Yep.
Or are you marking the weight of the jar fill?
You are selling it as chunk foam, which the verbiage for that is comb with honey. So it's when you label it,
So it doesn't the product.
but the total product is the weight that you have to list. Like I'll pass this one around. This is just the weight of the comb, and then it also has to be in ounces and grams.
So you're doing that for each individual case?
I do for each individual cut. Again, we put the plastic box on there, tear it out, and then we put this on it, so then that will give me just that. And for me, I go through and I don't put the labels on right away. And this is not a good example because this was from 2 years old. See, it's got some. But we wait to label them until they're leaving, because some people, if they're buying it to resell it, they don't want my label on it. And once you put a sticky label on these, it's hard to get it off. So the weight is on it so they can transfer the weight of their labels. But you can have that one. That make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Is that it? That's it? Okay.
Do you refrigerate them at all, or just temperature?
Oh, no, that's been sitting out for a couple of years.
After she froze.
Yeah.
Someplace along the line got froze.
Yeah, so, okay, so a couple things now. You can, let's circle back to freezing. You can freeze the whole box. You can freeze it by frame. Or if you go through and do the cuts, you're gonna put them on the cookie, you're gonna put it on the cooling rack on the cookie sheet, let it drain 24 hours so you don't get that seepage there. And then from there, after you box them up, then put them all in a box, like a cardboard box, whatever, and put them in a black garbage bag. Then put it in the freezer for like a week. And what happens then is after a week, you take it out and set it out, and then do not open anything for like a day or so. Because you know how when you take stuff out of the freezer, it kind of frosts up and gets funky. If you take it out and unwrap it, the inside of that box is going to frost. All right, so you don't want that because that's going to screw your product. And again, you add moisture to honey, then you get problems. All right, so it does have to be frozen somewhere along the line. I bought some from a competitor in Medina, and just to show the right way to cut it versus maybe not the right way to cut it and stuff. And I had it on the shelf. I had purchased it in July and I was given the talk in December. I knew it was coming up. By the time December came around, his had larvae crawling all in it. I couldn't even use it for my talk because it grossed me out. But again, this is why, because we have small hive beetle and we have wax moth. You are not going to be able to see the eggs or those little tiny larvae in the beginning. Freeze it. The other thing is louse or lice. You know, sometimes you'll see tracking on your comb, your capped honey. That's something tunneling in there. You want to kill that too. That's the worst thing, is to do all this work and then you sell it to a customer and they call you 6 months later, there's something crawling. Is that one lady, she called and she said, I bought some combed honey from down at the square and there's stuff crawling in it. Is that pollen? No, pollen doesn't move. Where did you get it? But anyway, yeah. So that's the gist of it.
Did yours ever crack in a freezer?
No. I usually cut
Like it
mine,
gets sweaty?
no,
I haven't sweat in my freezer. But I mean, mine, sometimes when it comes out of the freezer, that fragile wax
will crack.
crack.
That's why I usually
And
cut
then
all
I
mine.
get, it gets a little.
Yeah, I usually cut, you'll see this one is weak. I usually cut all mine, drain them, box them, then freeze them. If I don't get to them, I have like 3 boxes outside still that I will put, really fine hardware cloth and then a screen and then a buffer board, about 1-inch buffer board, and then the cut foam boxes, and then a tight lid on the top, and they sit outside all winter. And so that freezes them, so then I don't have to worry about it. The downside to that, though, that's why I didn't pass this one around, is like Roger said, it's gonna get weak because it's a solid piece. If you cut it, drain it, freeze it, I've never had a problem with the pieces then getting weak. But if you don't do that, but you'll see here where it's a little bit weepy and underneath, so like this one can't be competition. Plus the backside. I look on. Anyway, okay, so the other thing I wanted to show you guys, these make really good trays too to store things in. I don't know if you can even find these anymore. These are like really old. I like these because you can snap the lid on it and nothing can get in there, and you can stack them so that they don't crunch. So anyway, take your cooling rack, put it above there. When you go to do your cuts, find whichever is the flattest of your fat frame. Does that make sense? 'Cause you don't want
Flattest and prettiest.
the flattest.
Well, yeah, well, what I'm
Right.
saying is the flattest, and I tend to put my ugly frame, side of the frame
Down, right. So you're gonna put it, and this isn't big enough, so we're only gonna cut like one part of it. So anyway, you're gonna put this on here. And again, take your hot knife, which is hot, but cut right along through that starter strip. And it's pretty hard to get through there. Where's that? So again, we might go ahead and mark this right off first, and cut in about there. And then we're gonna eat this. Do we have any spoons? No? All right, you can use your thing. So anyway, you get pretty good at this. So you're gonna cut through. Again, you're gonna cut the side because, and if this was like a hot knife, it's not gonna tear up the cone as much. Again, you're gonna cut the top, the side. And if it's not drawn all the way to the edge, so it's like perfect, you're gonna cut into where it is perfect. Does that make sense? And usually about now, once you have these 3 sides cut, you're gonna start seeing it starting to let go. So you wanna be careful with that. And I won't touch your flipper anymore. Again, this is going to be probably too big. This is one of the larger ones. So again, they're following that same pattern. So look across, that's what you're gonna cut. If you were doing this for competition, you're gonna use a very hot knife. You're gonna go down, tip a little bit to the side, and then go up. Get a clean knife, cut again. You're gonna try and just go down as best as you can. Don't saw it, like I just did.
In the competition, you're talking about like entry in the fair.
Right, right. And you should enter. It is so much fun.
I used
Where to
way
go?
back in grade
He
school.
wants, I think he wants to see if you can find some symbols.
It's a lot of fun. You know, read your premium books. Make sure that what you are reading is what you are entering. Okay. So what you're going to do then is you're going to very carefully pick this up. All right. And then this part, you can see how nice that looks. Again, this is the piece that we cut loose. And then you're going to, again, wipe your knife off. When you go to do that cut, you're gonna cut straight down.
Is it easier with serrated or just sharp?
Sharp.
Just sharp.
No serrated.
Actually, that's one of the nice things, that's one of the nice things about the coffee pot. Because I said I leave it sitting in the coffee pot with hot water. And so I don't, the thing I'm wiping off is water basically.
So we're not gonna pass this around because it's gonna get real messy. But I want you to come look at just that we just cut it, we just separated it, and how much is running off it now. If you box this right now, you're gonna have like half of that container is gonna be it's gonna be dribble. It's a mess. So don't do that because it just looks bad. That one is probably a giveaway to someplace because we have, it wasn't drained long enough. So, again, box them in after 24 hours, goes in the freezer for, I would say, minimum 3 days. It says 24 hours, don't do that. 3 days, take it out, do not unwrap it. Let it sit for at least a day and then take it out so it doesn't sweat. Good stuff.
Peggy, back up just, when you cut plastic container, then you put it in the box, a box, or a container, put that container with plastic.
Oh, you're gonna cut this, let it drain 24 hours. Take this, put it in its container, whatever it is, whether it be a plastic box, whatever. You're gonna pick it up. You're gonna pick it up very carefully by the rib. I mean, this rib is very strong, so you're gonna be very, very careful. Don't do it on a hot day. Do it when it's a little bit cooler. And be real careful that you don't mash it in, because a lot of times we want to I picked it, and you'll leave fingerprints, and I'll think, fish.
A lot of times I'll use a real thin sheet metal spatula to kind of give me a hang-on point. But after a while, I'll end up just using my fingers to go expand. But first part of the season, a lot of times I'll just so I got something to lever into myself, not have so many fingers.
If you are going to use a spatula, make sure that this is cool. That if it's like over 75 degrees, spatula will damage.
Oh, I ain't saying trying to slide underneath it. I'm just saying
Right.
I'm kind of catching it at the rib just enough that I can put little bit of pressure both ways to lift it up and set it in the box.
But again, do this when it's cooler, because let it drain and it's warm, because that'll clean it faster. But when you then go to handle it, make sure that it's a cooler time. Okay?
At Trader Joe's, they sell these cups of creamy honey. Is that just this? That's the food process?
No, that's a whole other story. That's cream honey. That's what else? Yeah, what am I missing? Well, you saw nothing was being picked. Again, you want a strong honey flow, no sugar water. And you can do this any time of the year, which is kind of cool, as long as you can mark flow, and then also mark that, pull that queen out so you don't get any larvae, and overcrowd them. I have made it, you'll notice this one, this is like a late, probably a July-ish one, so it's a little golden. I've had it where it's like in water white. And I have a friend in New York that she does it. It's so dark. It's ridiculous. It looks like buckwheat. Thank God it's not. But it looks like it could be. But she will sell those. She cuts. It'll be 3 strips in a 4x4 box, and she sells that in New York, Madison, New York, for $45. It's not even a pound. But she's like, she also does like honey tasting thing that, it's $35 a person to come. Yeah, we should live in New York or go do this.
Just go visit.
Yeah, let's go.
Go to visit.
I don't know. Okay, so if you guys want to come up, and there's Roger found some napkins and some forks.
No spoons.
No, so, sorry, stab and go.
Do
Um,
your best.
And the reason why, this is getting sacrificed anyway, because the side that you're looking at looks really nice, right? But the side that's not, they didn't mill it all the way down. So we would have cut here anyway and made it into those little short pieces. But anyway, so come up with something.
One more. This is probably a whole nother topic, but, are Ohio's, the cottage food law things, is it favorable to the people or to the government or whatever? I mean, is it worth selling stuff?
Oh, yeah, it's worth it. It's worth it. This is, because this is pure honey, this doesn't fall under cottage rule. As long as the product is pure, you're okay in honey. As soon as you add something to it, now you fall under cottage rule. And there's not that big of a hoop with it. Is you just have to label it has to be this product is home produced. There's a couple other little things it has to have. Identification, what is it? So like let's talk about creamed honey. It's creamed honey. You flavored it with powdered or dehydrated cinnamon, okay? So because you added something to it, it's no longer pure. You have to have it weighted. So it's going to be, in weight or ounces, in grams, never pounds, always ounces. It has to have the name of the place that it came from. It has to have the address, phone number, and option. So you have